Welcome back. In the last video, we set up our UI using the graphical interface and created a skeleton for our custom paint view, which is going to be our canvas for our app. So what's next is we need to link up all of the UI objects back in the main activity. So we don't need this on Create Options menu because we're only going to have one screen, but what we do need is to declare all of our buttons. So we have button red, blue, green, black, and our clear button. We also need to initialize our paint view. And this is going to yell at me because I need to import the button object. So now that we've now that we've declared our variables, we need to initialize them. And the way we're going to do that is using the findViewById method to pull the association out from the R file, which, if you'll recall from the Hello Per tutorial, the R file is basically a liaison between the XML UI layout that we did and our Java code here. So just to start, our red button is going to be cast as a button, and then we're going to call find view by ID with r.id, and then you'll see that all of them pop up. Alright, I've skipped ahead here so you don't have to watch me typing all of these things, but I've initialized all of my variables that I declared up here, and so now we're ready to start actually implementing our functionality. So before, we just made our actual class be the on-click listener for the buttons because we only had one. But since we have multiple buttons, a quicker and a little bit cleaner way to do it is to just declare a new on-click listener for each button. So for example, if I want to control what the red button does, I can type redButton.setOnClickListener. And rather than importing an on-click listener that already exists, I'm going to create a new one. And all we really need to control in here is what happens on the on-click. So we're going to do an override and write in our on-click method. Oh yeah, so we need to import on-click listener, and we need to import view. And now we're able to control just what the red button does on a click with whatever we decide to type in this method. So now I'm going to copy this and go ahead and do it 4 more times for each of the 5 buttons that we have. So what's the idea with these methods? Well, the idea is at the click of a button, we want to be able to change the color that's being drawn. Now, this is going to happen with an object called paint that's going to be stored in our paintview.java. So let's go ahead and initialize and declare that. And what paint does is it stores information such as the color that's being drawn and whether there's anti-aliasing, things like that. But all we really are concerned about is the color. And so now that our paint view has this object paint, we're able to access that from this main activity. So to start out, I want to set a default color for the paint view. Paint and we want to set the color to be, let's say I want my default color to be black. Now what this is, what this is a static variable that just makes it, it's representing an integer, but it makes it easier for us to work with so we don't have to memorize that, for example, 0 is black and 2 is green. So while setColor takes in an integer, we're able to call this static color.black to let it know that that's what we want. And so all we have to do inside our onClick listeners is to say, well, when I click the red button, I want my color to be red. When I click the blue button, I want the color to be blue, and so on. Now for the clear button, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to set the color to be white, and then I'm going to force it to be drawn, which I'll explain in a little bit, but the idea is while these buttons just set the color, the clear button is going to set the color as white and then draw over the entire canvas, which essentially is going to erase everything. So I'll just put that in now. Invalidate is a method that can be called on any view that can force it to call on draw. So since we're going to be using our fingers to paint on this screen, that means we're going to be dealing with a touch gesture. And the way we can deal with that is by implementing an on-touch listener. And much like the on-click listener, this is just going to have a method called onTouch that we can then use to control what happens every time the user touches the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and let Eclipse add the method skeleton for me. Next we need to set the paint views on touch listener to this.